Thursday was officially Syllabus Day for the Guardians in Arizona. As Jeff can attest to, you probably don't really learn a whole lot on Syllabus Day, but you got to talk about it anyway. That's what we're going to do on today's Locked On Guardians.
Tanner Bibee, the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Syllabus Day, always a fun day. You can count on nothing being done and just complaining.
I've never heard this expression in my whole life. I can attest to nothing because I've never heard anyone say Syllabus Day in the history of my lifetime.
You are a teacher. How do you not know what Syllabus Day is? All right, comment below if
I've
you
never
know
heard
what
this
Syllabus
expression.
Day is.
Never heard this expression.
All right.
Having taught, having gone to Ohio State, having gone to master's program, I've never heard the expression Syllabus Day. That's insane. We're going to start off with this.
We're talking about Syllabus Day. The Guardians, pitchers and catchers officially reported, or they've been there, but they officially threw pitches. They officially talked to reporters on Thursday. So we'll talk about what we learned from them on Syllabus Day. I'm going to explain this to Jeff a little bit, I guess, still. We'll talk about expectations for the year, what's realistic, what isn't. And then college baseball is back today. We will talk a little bit about college baseball and the draft at the end of today's show. So if you are into the draft, stick around to the end for that. We'll get to the actual Guardian stuff first. And before we get into all that, first, of course, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $100 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Take advantage of that offer. I'm Justin Latta. Been covering the Guardians minor league system since 2007. I was formerly the editor-in-chief of Guardians Baseball Insider. Currently a freelancer at the News Herald and the Morning Journal, and Prospects Live and Next Year in Cleveland.substack.com.
I'm Jeff Ellis. I've been a teacher for over a decade now, and I have never heard of Syllabus Day. When I'm not teaching, I do this podcast. For some reason, when they decide to go out and start a baseball podcast, they reached out to me because at the time I was a national writer at Scouting 24/7 on prospects in the draft. So I know some people say we talk about the draft too much, but come on, you grew up in Cleveland. It's a lot of teams being terrible and getting excited for draft picks. That's how it works. Cleveland is a draft town. I've always stood by that.
Yeah, we are a draft town. Yeah, we'll get to that at the end. We'll talk about actual Guardians news first. And yeah, the draft don't have the same zing this year because Cleveland doesn't have the number 1 overall pick, but still plenty.
It's always got to be their lifeblood, though. It's always got to be their lifeblood.
I would argue trades, but I would guess they still have to trade those guys at some point. So, yeah. Before we get into all that, let's talk about what we heard from the Guardians on day one. So the Guardians had a couple of interviews. It was Hunter Gaddis, Cade Smith, Austin Hedges, Paul Sewald, and Tanner Bibee. So obviously a bunch of pitchers and one catcher. Jeff, I will say two themes I heard on today's Zoom interviews. The first one was a lot of questions to the relievers about what they're doing to prepare for the possibility of bullpen hangover. We spent a lot of time this offseason discussing that, and I still think it is a big deal. You know, they'll have a new bullpen coach. You have a bunch of guys that pitch the deepest of their careers in the bullpen, and Tanner Bibee on top of that, truthfully. So a lot of guys had a lot of questions about what these guys are doing to prepare for bullpen hangover, and it sounds like a lot of them will be eased in, but it sounds like a lot of them. This is what teams do anymore. This is not. I think what we have to realize too is, and hasn't changed for a while. It's been like this for a while, but if you're of an older generation when it comes to baseball, spring training used to be Syllabus Day. It used to be that was your time to get back in baseball shape, right? You did whatever you want in the off season, then you got to Arizona or Florida, and that was how you worked back into baseball shape. That is no longer the case in modern baseball. These guys are living in California, they're living in Arizona, they're living in warm weather climates, and they're taking a month off and they're throwing again. They're on a throwing program. They're working on stuff over the off season. They're working on progressions. You are coming to spring training prepared to throw. You are not picking up a ball in spring training for the first time since the end of October and November, unless you had surgery. These guys are throwing all off season wrong. So I think there's much as a reason to be concerned about bullpen hangover, but I think all these guys walked away from the offseason. I'm sure the Guardians also walked away from the regular season knowing that that's something they have to contend with. And these guys generally all see, Cade Smith talked about it. Gaddis talked about it. Paul Sewald, has some experience with that too. These guys all, went into the offseason knowing that's something they have to be prepared for. So I feel like words are good, words are great, but actions are better. And I don't know, I feel like at least the fact they knew they had to contend with it is a good thing.
Yeah. It's there. First off, by saying there's no such thing as syllabus day. Justin's just making up this expression. And then, it's.
I guarantee you're going to get so many comments saying, I know it's syllabus day. It's the first day you went to class and the teacher hands out the syllabus for the year. They hand out what you're doing for the year.
Really give out syllabuses anymore. At least not at the middle school level. I'll say syllabuses.
Okay, in college, didn't they for you?
I mean, some classes, not all.
You went to college in the dark ages.
I went to Ohio State. The internet
was invented.
I took coaching football from Coach Tressel when I was there. Funny story. He corrected me on Seneca. He goes, "Oh, here's a quote from Seneca. Anyone know who that is?" I just like the quote, and I said he was a Roman senator, and he said, "Oh no, it sounds like an Indian name to me," and corrected me in front of the whole class. And that was.
I've got a good professional Jim Tressel story too, but not for this podcast. It was from my time at Akron.
That was my humorous one where I got incorrectly corrected. But yeah, I mean, they're gonna say all the right things, but as you point out, like so many of these guys are just baseball is year round. Like they might rest their arm, but a lot of times they're still going to pitching facilities. And I think back to like Adam Ottavino. Like remember the story of him like going to pitch in like a abandoned building and working with that on stuff.
Well, that was like during
COVID, I know, but still, like I mean, there's not things
options.
There's not. These guys are always finding ways to advance and better themselves, even if they're resting their arm. They're doing something else. This isn't the 70s where you could come back from the off season and you'd have guys looking like me and they'd have to work their way back. Those there's not that many guys
at one time.
There was like legitimate off seasons, but that's not the case anymore. And these players are coming unprepared, and I think that's also like I don't know. One of the things I really want to look at if I have time in the next few weeks is seeing how much bullpen volatility is a myth anymore, and how much it was like. Because it feels like just anecdotally
saying it is.
I know, but because that is historically the case. But then, I spent the last day, like I was looking at Kenley Jansen. I'm like, is this an upgrade for Anaheim? I was looking around other teams and it's like, I'm realizing a lot of good relievers are good relievers. Like in general, if you're good, you're good. Like there used to be a time where even the good ones had a degree of volatility. I think we're refining this game to the point, and this is what people don't love about it at times, that it is easier. I mean, injuries are going to pop up, but I think good versus good. And yeah, some guy, there are the weird years because it's a small sample size every single year, like Class A. But yeah, I think we're seeing like kind of a changing of the guard with it, and that's one of those things I would like to research.
Pun intended. Okay, so 3 themes, but 2. The second one here was talking a lot about leadership. There's a lot of questions about how the team would react to losing guys like Josh Naylor and Andres Gimenez. And this one will throw you for a loop if you haven't heard it, I think. But there was a lot of questions about those guys. It stinks to lose those guys. Other guys will step up. There was talking about, guys like Stephen Kwan. Here's a player. I don't think you wouldn't guess this in a million years, Jeff. This is a player that Austin Hedges brought up about leadership and other guys emerging. Austin Hedges said that Brian Rocchio, people are going to be really impressed with Brian Rocchio. They think he is going to become kind of the captain of the infield with Andres Gimenez being gone. So Austin Hedges is expecting big things from Brian Rocchio. I don't know about performance, but definitely in leadership. It sounds like that's something to watch for in camp and going into the season. As Austin Hedges said, people will be impressed with Brian Rocchio. What do you make of that?
Well, I will say, like, it felt like every time they had a home run or a big moment, like he was in the middle of that scrum and he was, I know some people are like, oh, I think Jose is annoyed with him. It's like, I don't know, that people do like to overread into things. It's like he was always there. He kind of had some of that Naylor energy. when you're looking at like big moment and him liking to be a part of it. So that doesn't necessarily shock me. He was the professor. Maybe he's more mature, even if at points we called him the nutty professor. But let's be honest, at the end of the day, he's got to perform, right? Like we heard that Miles Straw was kind of like a great leadership guy when he was here at points, but I think it's hard to be that. And I know people will be like, but Austin Hedges. And yes, Austin Hedges, I think, is just a weird case. Like everyone, he has so much respect and cachet with someone like Jose and the rest of the team that doesn't matter. But I think to be some degree of leadership, they need performance. And I think Rocchio, if he is going to ascend, needs to step up a little more. Maybe I'm wrong in that. And yes, I understand the elephant in the room is Hedges, but I think Hedges is just, he's a unicorn in his way. Like guys with his performance.
It's the backup catcher thing.
Yeah. And catchers. Yeah. And I think it's also helps when you're a catcher, since like all the coaches, I believe, in baseball right now used to be catchers. Isn't that the rule? You can only catch if coach if you're a catcher.
Craig Counsell was an infielder.
He was,
the first that came to mind.
But
Tito wasn't a catcher.
No, but it's one of those situations where
Aaron
I think
Boone, not a catcher. Dave Roberts, not a catcher.
Is Aaron Boone a good manager?
That's a question for another podcast. I don't know.
But I think like
today.
I think at the end of the day, it's a situation where if he is going to be that guy, he's got to step up and find more consistent performance. Like, is the postseason going to be what he is, or is the postseason an outlier? Like, what can we see with him? And he is the shortstop. Let's see what this dude can do. And I would love if he could step into a leadership position for this team. I think Josh Naylor was a leader. It always felt like Gimenez was kind of more quiet leadership. I don't know. Maybe I'm projecting. It always felt like he was a dude with confidence issues, and that's a hard thing to believe as a leader. He was always trying to fix himself, and I don't know. I think losing Naylor probably does hurt, but I am a little surprised by Rocchio.
Yeah, I'll tell you why I think Austin Hedges said that here in just a minute. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the other thing I noticed from spring training interviews from day one with pitchers and catchers. We'll talk about some player-specific stuff, and of course, we will get into some draft/college baseball stuff on the first day of D1 college baseball and the rest of today's Locked On Guardians. The NBA's All-Star Weekend is coming here soon. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. No better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off, you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, though I wouldn't really do that in the All-Star game. To be honest, I don't really know what the All-Star format is anymore. They've gone with the ELO format. They've had the draft. And I think it's back to like some 3-on-3s, like individual teams. I can't remember what they're doing. But stay on the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine all your live bets into a same game parlay. I'll be very curious to see if anybody actually puts any money down on the NBA All-Star game, because we know it is one of those All-Star games you really can't predict because nobody plays defense. So be careful with that. The dunk contest is kind of a sham these days. At least Darius Garland's in the three-point contest. Bet on the Cleveland guy in the three-point contest. So right now, if you're a new FanDuel customer, get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Maybe throw that $5 bet on Darius Garland. And if that wins, visit FanDuel.com today to join. FanDuel.com, your shot at $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Jeff, here's why I think Austin Hedges said he thinks Brian Rocchio will step up and be a guy who could be a leader. People will be...
he wants to make everyday DB Collins mad?
Maybe. The official quote was, I think everyone's going to be impressed with Rocchio this year. There's going to be some competition at second base. It's going to be a young guy, and I think Rocchio is going to be the guy to step into that Gimenez role and help those young guys. And that's exactly why I think Hedges said it. Because I think he was trying to motivate Brian Rocchio a little bit. I think he was trying to give him some confidence. Andres Gimenez was him and Rocchio had a really good relationship a year ago, and Gimenez really helped Rocchio settle in. I know Rocchio didn't have the greatest year, and people are not sure what to expect from him. But in terms of his confidence growing and just handling his first full big league season, Gimenez was a big part of that. and now he's gone. So Rocchio's kind of do this alone for the first time. And now he's got to step up and be the guy who coaches along Juan Brito or Angel Martinez or whatever it is at second base. So I think that was trying to give Brian Rocchio a little boost, or maybe just trying to give him a little confidence. That's what I think. That makes sense. Austin Hedges is a master motivator.
He's, I don't know how much like that works. Like, we're I just with adults to say, well, he's a secret leader to help motivate him to be more confident. It
reminds me of? It reminds me of this is very niche. We'll see if anybody knows this. But there was an episode of Boy Meets World. I watch Boy Meets World in the morning when I work out. I get up in the morning, I ride my bike, and I watch Boy Meets World to make the time pass. There's this episode of Boy Meets World in the high school years where Mr. Feeney has Eric tutor the John Adams quarterback, who obviously is very jockey, the typical 90s jock star on TV, where he can't figure anything out. And he ends up tutoring the quarterback, and he gets a C on his test. But Eric Matthews gets an A because he was the one teaching the other guy. You see what I'm saying?
I mean, that's how scaffolding works in education. I haven't heard of Syllabus Day, but I've heard of this approach, which is true mastery is taught by teaching. But I'm just gonna...
That's what I'm saying. Austin Hedges is doing here.
Now, if you pardon me, I'm going to drink my eggnog, eat my licorice, and just talk about Syllabus Day the rest of the show.
Good. All right, let's talk about motivations. I mentioned motivation. That was the other key theme, I think, on day one of all these interviews and guys and everything being official on Syllabus Day. A lot of questions about you're throwing gum paper airplanes in your basement like
my cat plays fetch, so I'm getting her to be quiet by throwing her mouse across the.
All right, this show's gone off the rails. Someone really gonna get comments saying I couldn't listen because this was off the rails, or people are gonna love it. I don't know, but there were a lot of questions about motivation, and I thought that all the responses from the players, Cade Smith, Austin Hedges, Hunter Gaddis, Tanner Bibee, talked about how close they were to the World Series. And I know we can debate whether or not how close they really were, but a lot of players, talked about getting that deep in the playoffs, and there was some talk about this in 2016 at the end of the season. Obviously the end of the World Series in 2016 really hurt, but when that team left Cleveland, and I know it was a lot deeper in the season, but when that team left Cleveland, a lot of people were like, can't wait to get to Goodyear, and I can't wait to get this started again because I'm motivated to get back here next year. I know it's a different scenario, and I know that was the actual World Series, but kind of the same comments here. It feels like a lot of guys, the end of the season hurt, but a lot of them couldn't wait to get back to Goodyear and get this going again. And a lot of them preached about being motivated by feeling like they had a shot to get to the World Series, and they're motivated to try to do it again. And again, that's great. That's cliches and platitudes and all that stuff. But I wonder how much motivation really can play into that, because it took a while for the 2017 team to find their mark, and that only happened because of a 22-game winning streak. Obviously, things are very, very different here, but I'm very curious to see how much motivation really motivates this team, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Well, you're not like, I just can't imagine being a professional athlete and not being completely, totally unmotivated to win. Like I was that kid that, like, it didn't matter what I was doing. Like, I remember playing intramural ice hockey at Ohio State, and I would have the loudest cheering section from our group of friends. Like, why? They're like, because it's you're out there trying the whole shift, I can't turn that off. And it's a very honest thing of like, I don't know if I like to win as much as I hate that feeling of losing. And I think for most pro athletes, it's that, like, that is the one thing I have in common with pro athletes. That's it. Nothing beyond that is that, like, motivation and drive, like the inability to turn that off. Like, once you're in it, I mean, I'm the person who broke both my wrists playing kickball.
You also use your feet in kickball in case you.
Well, I was scoring from first, and I stepped on home plate, and it was a brand new gym floor, and I slammed into a wall.
Wow.
Things happen. It was an adventurous childhood. But yeah, I think
So two things we learned today. Jeff doesn't know what syllabus day is, and he takes his kickball very seriously.
Yeah, I didn't tell anyone. I stayed at school the whole day with 2 broken wrists. That's the cap around that story. That was second period. And I had pneumonia at the time, but I was faking health. So that story gets even more fun. But to get back to what really matters, what people care about, not my random childhood, is like, I think all of these guys, how can it not leave a nasty taste in your mouth? How can it not leave you? Because no matter what happens, you and I were talking off air, you only get so many chances at the ALCS. So few teams get back like to the ALCS in a regular manner. Like there's a small list of teams. I mean, yeah, the Dodgers won the World Series last year. The year before they got knocked out because the middle of their order couldn't hit. We'll have to see what happens. Baseball postseason is weird. Anything can happen. And anytime you get close, you should take it seriously. You should be kind of bad taste in your mouth because things can get weird. Things can go either way. And while, yeah, they lost 4-1, and it feels like, oh, that's not that close. It doesn't matter. You should always feel like we were a few things away. We can do this. And if a guy came back happy, like, hey, we made the LCS, that was good enough. Like, I don't know if I want them on my team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in general, pro athletes and especially minor league, especially Major League Baseball players going through the minors, you don't get as far as you do without being extra motivated. Like they are more motivated than most of your typical people their age, even more so than people who just graduate college. I mean, people going to be doctors and lawyers, that's very high motivation too. But you don't get to this stage of being an athlete without being motivated and believing in yourself anyway. And I think all athletes, especially the great ones, are motivated by the taste of winning. And like you said, people who hate losing. And if you, like you said, if you don't have a guy on your team that doesn't want to get back to the LCS, you don't want that guy to be your teammate. I think it's the same thing. If you get to the ALCS and you get to that, especially all these guys who this is their first taste of October baseball, that electricity, and even as fans and media, we feel it. There's a different air about October baseball. If being part of that, especially for the first time, doesn't motivate you to want to get back the next year, then you definitely are in the wrong business. Because I think there's nothing like October baseball, and yeah, if that feeling of playing on October baseball doesn't absolutely motivate you to come back the next year and need to have that environment once again, yeah, I think something's very wrong. So yeah, I think motivation could be a real thing here. I got a couple of player focused things we'll talk about. We'll talk about expectations, and we promise we will get to some fun first day of college baseball stuff here on the rest of this episode of Locked On Guardians. Very quickly, 2 player-related things. Also, thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today. And every day, wherever you get podcasts, please make sure you are subscribed on YouTube if this is your first time. We appreciate you being here. If you've been here a while and you're not subscribed, we'd love for you to get subscribed so we can get to 4K. We're pretty close, under 200, I think, at this point.
I think less than 120.
Less than 120. Look at that. We're getting super close. So tell a friend, sign up for a new email address, do that, and click a bell so you never miss a video. And make sure you're auto downloading on audio too, so you get an episode sent right to your phone. Never miss that. That helps us too. All right, let's get to this couple of things. So this was from Anthony Castrovins, who, by the way, is taking over, or at least temporarily, the MLB.com beat. Yeah, Mandy Bell, who did a good job on the beat, she is leaving for some youth content with MLB.com. So best of luck to Mandy, and thanks for her time in Cleveland. This one, though, these 2 things came from Anthony Castrovins in Goodyear. The first one I have is about Slade Seccon, and his first quote we've seen from him since he's come to Cleveland is cleaning up his mechanics. But the big thing to me, I think, Jeff, that stands out here, this is a huge one because we already knew about this, but it's a big thing for Seccon to be better this year. He's developed some new pitches, especially different versions of the fastball. One goes left, one that goes right. That is a big one right there. Fixing the fastball. Else. Yes. Having fastballs that go in 2 directions is especially important for anybody, but also a guy who had a very lively but very hittable fastball a year ago. If they have some fastball kinks worked out with him, I am super excited for Slade Seccon.
I am as well. And I'll just go back to what I mentioned multiple times. Like when the Rays and the Guardians want this guy, that speaks
Yes.
volumes. And when the biggest knock on a guy is his fastball and he's already working on ways to improve, change, or, and you're like, well, why does it matter to have it breaking different ways? Because especially if you can, repeat and tunnel them well, a guy might think it's going to be here and it's the other side, or it's really helpful too against righties versus lefties. It gives you a better tool to have that pitch going away. But occasionally, going in is also just as valuable. So that's like because his fastball is honestly like a 40 grade pitch. If I'm being generous, it might be worse because
I think it's a 45 at least because of the velocity.
I mean, I don't know.
By velocity alone, it should have been a 55.
I know, but like
97.
That's where I always disagree. It was like for too long, fastballs were all about velocity, and it's like it's easy to hit something.
Margin of error, at least.
Yes, it does help.
I think velocity alone gave him margin of error. Obviously, it got hit hard a year ago.
It got slaughtered. It was almost a non-usable pitch.
582 slugging percentage.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. It was definitely a below average fastball, considering how like the Carlos Vargas thing, right? Like that's a deeper cut way back, but. Yeah, I think velocity alone keeps it at a 45, but you're right. Movement and just the effectiveness really limited it. But yeah, if you fix that, if you have, like you said, having a fastball that goes away
mid-rotation potential.
Yeah, big one. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like from Slade Seccon, and they are going to stretch him out as a starter, and then they'll go into camp and see what that looks like and what they need from him. The other one, Luis Ortiz, who I was just as excited about. This is another one, kind of a less of a bigger deal, but also kind of a big deal. He said towards the end of last year, he was pretty much scrapping his changeup and upping the use of his cutter. The Guardians want him to use his full repertoire, so they want him to be throwing the cutter and the changeup. So I'll be curious to see what they have worked out with him in terms of his changeup. If he can add a changeup, because this is a guy who had 3 different fastballs, right? He had the cutter, the 4-seam, and I think a sinker. Is that right? And then the slider was a big pitch for him.
The sinker was huge for him. That's why he's a really good sinker, but really low K rates. Like his K rates were very low in spite of it being a good pitch because that sinker just saws bats off.
Yeah, the cutter was his weapon against lefties because his changeup was a kind of a mess last year. That's why he scrapped it. So if Cleveland has tweaked his changeup and if that makes any improvements at all, once again, another big piece there. So I'm excited.
And they've done a lot of great work on changeups and cutters in recent years. Like
they have, yeah. Everybody needs a cutter these days. All right.
Yes.
I want to talk about expectations. We kind of had a little bit of discussion about this in the off the air. But real quickly, this is why I want to bring it up too. Also, I don't know. Did you see Bill Nye on MLB Network the other day?
No.
I didn't. I don't have the full context because it was only like a 30-second clip, so I haven't seen anything beyond the 30-second clip. But they asked him. He was talking about how he was a Mariners fan. I think a Phillies fan. I forget. Well, I know the Mariners came up. I think there was an NL team too. But they asked him who his World Series prediction was going to be for 2025. Who is going to win the World Series in 2025? Bill Nye, the science guy, did the science, and Bill Nye thinks the Guardians are going to win the World Series in 2025. So, as we know, the science is always right, and realistic expectation for this year is World Series or bust, right?
I think you are
full backing of science.
You are always going to hate life and baseball if that is your expectation. Like we've had this talk before, like, and you and I have been together for years now doing this, and you can tell we're friends because we spend more time with each other. That the only people we spend more time with are our wives. Like, it is. Is this the episode for lovers? Like, let's bring it down.
Well, baseball is for lovers.
But like, if
you get the reference.
You and I, we get along. We talk about all this stuff often, and it feels like the most fun seasons are the ones where you go in not expecting much, and it's the World, and then like which is 2 of the last 3 years, and then this in the 1 year in the middle was the one that was. But let's be honest, the disappointing year, then they end up getting the number 1 overall pick, and you're like, hey, it ended up being worth it to a small degree, right? Like,
remember was at the end of that Detroit series for that exact reason in 2020.
And then I always have to laugh about that because there was definitely people like, you have to always fight for second place. I'm like, so they could have not gotten Travis Bassett and and everyone else they got.
Yeah. No, I think I mean, expectation is a thief of joy. That's what we always say, right? That's what everyone always says. It's just interesting, like all these guys, they were talking about projection. That was the other big thing that came away from day one was projections. A lot of questions were like, hey, Pacoda doesn't like you, and all these projections don't like your team, and they don't think you're gonna make the playoffs. What do you guys think of that? And they're like, well, projections got it wrong a year ago, right?
They said projections, and they liked them the year before that. So they've been wrong the last 2 years.
But I think, like you said, this is where expectation becomes a thief of joy. These guys expect to win. I mean, all of them expect to win. Nobody goes to spring training hoping that they're gonna lose 100 games. I mean, some team is. The White Sox don't have any hope of doing anything, but you have to go
to lose 100 games.
Yes, but you have to go into spring training hoping for something, whether you get traded to a team that might not lose 100 games or whatever. But I hate to say it, but like anything less than an ALCS appearance again this year is probably a disappointment, right? Because you can't backslide. I know it's hard, like you said, it's hard to get back, but you can't backslide. So, like, I hate to say it, but like that, even though the offseason may not say so, and not that offseason winners ever do anything, but I think you have to get back to the ALCS.
No, I think it just make the postseason. It's such a weird sport in general. To me, it's like you just got to make if they qualify for the postseason, I consider it a successful year. Anytime that they make the postseason, it's I think I don't know. I don't want to be the person. I think that's going to be a joyless existence if you're the person that the postseason isn't good enough. I mean, like at the same, it's like, and I know we always joke about the Browns. It's like you realize, like since the Browns came back, they have won like 13 more games than the Guardians won in their 2 worst seasons during that time. Like this team has been a model of consistency. I have faith in, until I'm proven wrong. And I know people felt at points of been too Pollyanna this offseason or that I'm carrying water, but it's like this team, this front office for the most part has turned, 85, 90% of the time, every switch right, every knob, I guess you don't turn switches. But like, I just have a lot of faith in them right now until this is not the Colorado Rockies. This is not, the Chicago White Sox. Like I give them benefit of the doubt because I think they've earned that. Maybe I'm wrong, but going back to the original point, now that I digressed, is like, to me, anytime you make the postseason, it's a successful, especially because in baseball, where like the closest this team got to winning was the one time in the 2010s, they probably had no business or even being close. Like weird stuff happens. The Diamondbacks knocked off the Dodgers because for a week 2 years ago, Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman couldn't hit.
Yeah, it was very close. Yeah. All right. Let's talk real quickly before we get out of here on today's episode. It's college baseball is back, so draft season's kind of in full swing. I saw a little schedule up on here of teams that are playing today out there and some players of note. Jeff, I know, has some, so I'll let him do more, but I'll just throw out some of the guys that I see on the list today playing. There is Landon Becheetles, who is playing for Arkansas now, former Ohio State guy. He's interesting. Jeff, you've mentioned Henry Godbout in the past for Cleveland, although Virginia hitters terrifying. He's not catching this year either. Or no, that's Henry Ford, who moved off catcher. I'm sorry. Terrifying though with Virginia hitters. Wake Forest in action. No more Nick Kurtz, but we got Merrick Houston, who's an interesting guy. I like Jack Winay a year ago, so I'm very curious to see about Jack Winay on that team.
We got the young outfielder who I'm currently blanking on, the transfer.
Ethan Conrad. Oh yeah, Ethan Conrad's a good one. He'll be exciting to watch.
I thought I'd go
real quickly. I want to mention the one guy I'm most interested in. There's 2 guys college I'm interested in. 3 actually. Okay, 3 college guys we've mentioned before. I don't think Stanford's playing, or not Stanford. Fresno State I don't think is playing, but Murph Gray obviously is one we've talked about before. South Carolina plays, and you've got Ethan Petrie, who we talked about, even though the end zone swing and miss on him is absolutely terrifying on Ethan Petrie. And then the other guy, college-wise, the guy I'm most interested in, at least at the moment, is Caden Bodine from Coastal Carolina. I know Coastal Carolina's got a checkered track record when it comes to hitters because of that ballpark.
Terrible.
Yeah, but Caden Bodine, though, he might be a future guy. He might stick a catcher, and that's a guy with
hit well in the Cape.
Hit well in the Cape, and a guy that has a lot of other data that would be attractive to Cleveland. Doesn't strike out a lot, makes a lot of contact, and actually has some real power. So I'd be very curious to see where he falls this year. But I'm definitely going to be watching Caden Bodine on Friday.
I just want to keep it a little local, if that's okay. One, I want to point out, like, the Big Ten's kind of fun this year. If you're not paying attention, because of all the, the Pac-10, Pac-12 teams coming in. Like, it's a different Big Ten.
Oh,
UCLA, Oregon, Stanford, and Ohio State has, let's keep it, like I said, local. Their catcher, which I got 10 tabs open. It's giving me anxiety. But Matthew Graveline walked a ton last year. We had a good BABIP, was not great in the Cape on a limited sample, but an interesting catcher, a fun. I believe he's draft eligible this year. Yeah, he's like a kid from Centerville, so that's a fun kid. And then another catcher just in the state I want to point out is Boston Smith. He started out at Cincinnati. He's been at Wake the last 2 years. Or not Wake. Why did I say Wake? Wright State. I guess they both begin with W's, but last year 3.074, 3.698, 19 home runs. I don't know why he played at a very low in the Coastal Plain League. I feel like he should have got a better opportunity. But Boston Smith destroyed baseballs last year at Wright State, and that's been a really good developmental program. And then I got to talk about Kent State very quickly. Gavin Jones, North Royalton kid, who was a pretty big-name recruit, went to Alabama, redshirted. He was in the bullpen last year, looking to emerge at Kent. And then I can make you feel old. Jake Casey got hurt last year. There's a lot of people who have some big expectations for the senior this year, son of Sean Casey, for as a senior at Kent State. And then Reese Ripken is another fun kid to follow there. Also throw out Patrick Foltz, who is a kid from Springfield, Ohio, went to Shawnee, who's also at Wright State, is fun to watch. And pay attention to Cam Allen, who went to Ellett in Akron, who's also at Kent State, who's also at Wright State, who I believe should get a chance to start this year. He missed a lot of bats a year ago, and the walk rate was under 4. The ERA is a little high, but I don't know. They've done a good job of developing. There's not been a lot of guys from Ellett. It's nice to see an Akron kid. So I think Cam Allen at Wright State is someone just to keep your eye on. So I hope you enjoyed some of the local. I know I miss people, and we'll get to throughout the year. I will give props and time to everyone. Oh, real quick, Toledo. I mentioned this off air. Luke Leto was a big time athlete, potential first rounder out of high school, went to LSU, a big recruit. He's replacing Gavin Pike, who transferred to Louisville. Leto went from LSU to Kansas, and now he's at Toledo. Toledo has done a nice job developing players recently. And this is maybe the biggest name they have gotten in terms of, he was a across the board top 100 prospect in 2021. So real interesting player going in at Toledo as well. So
yeah, a lot of fun. Looking forward to following the draft again this year. And we'll talk about that, when news comes up, obviously, since that's already started. So we'll get to that on occasion. Maybe we'll make it a weekly thing. We'll see how we do and what happens during spring training. We'll obviously focus on the Guardians first, but if there's any draft-related stuff in Ohio and Guardians-related draft stuff, we will obviously continue to cover that. So we appreciate you guys sticking with us for that. We'll be back on Monday. We'll talk about anything that happened over the weekend on Monday morning headlines. Until then, everybody have a good, safe weekend and do something nice for somebody in your life. Give them flowers of some sort. Not the actual flowers, but give them flowers of some sort and learn what Syllabus Day is. Okay, comment and let me know if you know what that is, because I'm
not a thing. It's not a thing.
It's not a thing.
Comment, please do. Let's just help us out. Do your part. You know what to do. We appreciate all of you. Again, I'm going to say right now, our leading commenter on the air is John Everyday or John Fagan. So try to beat him out in the comments. Thank you all, and go Guardians, go.